Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the IO Extended hosted by the UK and Ireland. So we are representatives from the Google developers groups. There's over a dozen of them across the UK and Ireland. We've all kind of come together over the course of the last year and a half or so. So hope you enjoy. We've got this short video to really explain what the GDG is all about.
Technology brings us closer together, even when we're far apart. Google developer groups host meetup events for local technologists to connect, learn, and grow with others in their area.
The project I'm mostly proud of would be introduction to programming to 7 girls in my hometown.
In the GDG, I used to attend various workshops, like it was on Firebase, Android, Cloud. Everyone is learning from someone else.
We started to meet twice a week for a long time, learning Google Cloud. Amazing experience.
After joining Accenture as a software engineer, I started to share my journey in Medium, podcasts, and talks at online bootcamps.
My talk inspired one of community members a lot. So I mentored him to start his latter path. And 1 year later, at the same conference, he was giving a talk at the same stage.
One member of our community moved from being a DJ at our event to a developer and the first leading bank in the country.
When we do events that impact a lot of people, we are bringing opportunity to our region. So a lot of investors, a lot of startups, they will start to see opportunities here.
So, like I said, during the last year and a half or so, we have shifted a lot of these meetups online, which has been a great opportunity to meet people from all over the country, all over Europe, and all over the world, really. So it's been a really great opportunity. So one thing that is really important in GDG is that we are as inclusive as possible. So we want people from all skill levels to be able to reach out, connect, and have an opportunity to explore what it's all about. Like, my background is not in tech at all, other than kind of a sociology interest. So it's really nice to be able to connect with people from all different skill levels and not feel held back in any way. So, wide range of people. So this is the IO, which stands for Input Output, and it is an annual developer conference hosted by Google. And the GDG groups often will put on an extended version where we coordinate talks by speakers, and we get to put together all these really cool tracks and have a lot of interesting, engaging opportunities. So we do have quite a lot of people. Like I said before, we've got 17 different GDG groups all over the UK and Ireland. We've got student groups, we've got an SRE group, and we've all come together in what's been a really great community to have online during the last year and a half or so. But we are very excited to go back to some online options as well. So the GDG IO Extended does have 9 different tracks. This is currently the 3rd day, so there are 3 tracks today. We've had 2 days previously, and all of those are up on our YouTube page. You're welcome to check them out at your leisure. You're currently on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion track. I hope you're in the right place. All right, so we do have to do just a few quick little overview things. The first of which is some introductions. So we are your hosts. I'm Erica. I'm a co-organizer for GDG Glasgow. And yeah.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm one of the co-organisers for GDG Belfast. I've been doing that for maybe almost 2 years now. I was originally got involved from doing Women Tech Makers events, and that kind of segued into the wider GDG community.
Fantastic. My name is Ishak, and I'm the lead for GDG Manchester, which was started in January this year. So we're still relatively new and exciting. I myself am a career changer. I'm now a software engineer after being an electrician for 10 years. So really looking forward to this track.
Cool. So Ishak, you started the GDG in Manchester.
Certainly did. To be honest with you, Eric, I was quite surprised there wasn't one already. So when I came across it, I jumped on it. I thought, well, that is what Manchester is missing. Why not?
How did you hear about it? Because I'm the same way as Rachel. I heard about it through the Women Tech Makers.
So I just came through it through a lot of Googling, funnily enough. I was just, no pun intended, it was just it just came out like that. I wasn't necessarily looking for a meetup. I was just sort of going through support clubs and classes, etc., where I could sort of dive more into the community. And I came across the GDG home site, and I reached out and I thought, well, if there isn't one in Manchester, then I should be the one to start it. Let me try and build a community.
Cool. Have you guys gotten a good community response over the last year or so? Or the months?
It's been a bit hesitant because of the pandemic. We've not managed to do a lot, but hopefully now we're all open and everyone's more free, then we're certainly going to try and boost that back up.
How about you, Rachel? Are you finding much of an engagement in Belfast?
So Belfast, you know, before COVID times, there's so many different meetups. I mean, you could go to one every night of the week. And unfortunately, you know, I think everybody's found it quite difficult to keep them going virtually. Even just organising them, it's kind of hard to find the energy sometimes. So definitely engagement has unfortunately dropped, but things are looking up now. We are hoping to kind of do more virtual events and move into kind of hybrid events, and then eventually get back to seeing people in real life, which would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think we had kind of a similar experience here in Glasgow, where it seemed like there was a great turnout when the events were in person. And then especially at the start of 2020, people weren't really sure what's going on, you know, how engaged to stay with the community. But I will say over the course of the last few months, it does seem like we're getting more people reaching out and trying to make connections again, which has been really great.
I think that's the part people are looking forward to the most, is just being able to meet in person. I think it's shifting to everything online has been fantastic, but I think when you've been sat at your computer all day working, and then it's not sort of super easy to stay on for another 2-3 hours at meetups and watching things. But I think once we move over to a hybrid approach, 50-50, I know it's something I'm looking forward to, meeting people in person again. I've gone a bit incoherent just talking to my 6-year-old all the time.
Yeah. All right, so the next little bit of housekeeping that we're going to get off is the code of conduct. It's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, be good to each other. If you have any questions about what that means, we do have a handy link that you're welcome to check out. It basically says, please be cool. Please don't be not cool. And if you have any questions, let us know. So we do have our agenda up right now. So we've got 3 talks lined up for you tonight. They are in half-hour increments, so we're going to give our speakers about 20-25 minutes to chat, And then afterwards we'll have time for some questions and answers. So if you'd like to, feel free to pop your questions in the comment section. We will pass them on to the speakers and we will try to get them answered as best as possible. And yeah. So I think we're going to give it just a minute or two before we launch into our first speaker to let people join in case they were falling a minute behind. But I think we can get started a minute early. If you are sharing this on social media, please do remember to tag us in it. We have the hashtag Google I/O Extended UKI available. We would love to get your feedback. We'd love to hear if there's anything you'd like us to improve, anything that you particularly enjoyed about it. Any of your thoughts, please let us know. So we're going to give it just a minute or two, and then we will launch right into Melissa Jerkois. I will say that I feel like this is a particularly timely discussion regarding diversity in startups, because at least everything that I've been seeing has talked a lot about the growth in startups over the last year or so, especially over the last few months.
Definitely. I think diversity as a whole is such a huge subject, but I'm quite looking forward to this because I've never come across anything on the topic of diverse teams in startups. So I think I'm definitely going to have some questions at the end of this.
Yeah, me too. It's kind of in line with the research that I'm doing. So it's nice to have the opportunity to pick someone's brain.
Great. Well, on that note, we can add Melissa in. Welcome, Melissa.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So you're in the States, is that right?
I am. I'm based in New Hampshire, so the Northeast US.
Okay, very cool. And you did recently win the Tech Woman of the Year from the New Hampshire Tech Alliance.
I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's quite an honor. Thanks.
It's very cool. So how are things going out in New Hampshire? We've been having a heat wave, which is all that we've been able to talk about.
Yeah, it's almost like fall weather here right now. It's interesting. We had quite a heat wave and lots of humidity. And then we got like a just endless bout of rain. So there's no drought here anymore. It rained more than it has probably in the last 3 years within like a week. And now the weather is quite cool. It was like 55 degrees this morning. So they always say around here, you just wait. If you don't like the weather, just wait a minute, right? Like it's not exactly. It's probably the most unpredictable thing in this part of the country, but yeah. So it's feeling kind of fall-like, not so much like summer, but at least it's not humid, so I'll take it.
I like that. If you don't like the weather, wait a minute. It's quite similar to where I'm from. Yeah, it's quite similar to where I'm from in Manchester.
Yep. Right. I know. It's too funny, but we like it here. So.
So have you been involved in several startups then?
So I'm currently working as the CXO at a startup, co-founder of Diversify Thinking, which is a startup in its own right. And then we've worked and connected with startups, which we'll talk about when we get started today. But yeah, so quite a few, just especially in terms of like accelerator programs, like having exposure to all the startups that apply and participate in those. Having been in accelerator programs as our current startup has participated in several, you get exposed to, like I would say, the startup life and the startup world and the vibe. So, and the challenges they have, right? And so this in particular, I think, is one of those challenges because, you know, as we'll dive in, it's a huge topic. It's an overwhelming topic for everyone, I think, today. And it's such a huge buzzword, DE&I, and everyone's like, now there's an E in it. Crap, I just figured out the D and the I. And so it's continuing to get more confusing. And in fact, we often refer to that as like the dimensions of diversity. So it's pretty broad, but it's also there's a way to attack it. So I'm like really excited to be here today and maybe give you guys some tips. And even if there are people, like I always say, if there are people that are not from a startup perspective that are attending today, don't be like, never mind, this isn't for me. There's definitely, like I said, diversity is a topic that's top of mind to everyone right now for societal reasons, political reasons, you name it. So there's something you can take away here, and hopefully I'll give you enough like key takeaways around maybe actions you can take or just knowledge that you have, and knowledge is power. So some of the stuff I will tell the story from the perspective of a startup and the benefits for us specifically for a startup, but you can think of it in your own context. Like, are you part of a small team? Are you part of a large organization that's taking on a new initiative? So like there's a way that you're building and assembling people around that initiative. Like anytime that you're bringing people together, at the end of the day, you're kind of building a startup, right? Like, so it's really, assembling a group of people to be able to achieve and attack a goal with passion. That is startup life. Like that is exactly what it's all about, right? Your titles are kind of irrelevant. You just sort of do what you got to do to make things happen. I see a lot of nodding, so I feel like you know exactly where I'm coming from. So that's it, right? And so if you're ever in that experience, even in your personal life, right? So there'll be things here, I think, hopefully that you guys can glean from that. And our motto is always like, think differently, right? That diversified thinking is kind of what we're all about. So we want to take like the conversation that's been had all these years. So you mentioned I won the award recently for Tech Women of the Year. A lot of that is founded in some great work I've done in the state of New Hampshire to build community around specifically tech women, which I'm very passionate about. For obvious reasons, I happen to identify as a female in the industry of technology. So it makes me very well positioned to represent that particular dimension of diversity. And why I say that is because we co-founded Diversified Thinking 3 years ago now, and it was founded in the frustration, I guess I would say, of the fact that we had created all these communities around promoting women in technology and supporting them, but also even girls, and going up to school systems and creating programs to bring successful women into those school systems to show how role models can have many different careers in science and technology. But yet we don't see a lot of change. Like we're still having these conversations. So it's a little bit of Groundhog Day, if you know that saying. And like, it was super frustrating. We're like, all right, well, it's great to have the camaraderie and be brought together with people that are like you. I have a big aversion to the phrase like-minded. I'll just put that right out there. I don't use that phrase. I actually don't like that phrase. And part of that is because when you put yourself in a room full of like-minded people, what happens? It's the equivalent of group think, right? Because you're all thinking alike. That's the whole point. So we're very comfortable in that space, which is why diversity is so uncomfortable, because it's surrounding yourself with people not like you. But we felt like we were sort of supporting and creating these silos because we were bringing like-minded people together, but nothing was changing. So lots of great conversation, amazing community, such a great support system, but no real action was coming out of that. Like we had programs, I mean, don't get me wrong, we were executing and doing stuff, but like the net result wasn't different on the other side of that. So to me, I'm like, well, how's that success? Define what success looks like for you. And for me, it was, we don't have to have so many programs and conversations because we're living in a different world where there are women in leadership and girls don't think they can't pursue a career in science after like 5th grade. So we're not seeing a lot of that change. So Diversified Thinking was founded in the sense of raising the level of action to meet the level of conversation. And so that's what I'm here today to talk to you guys about. So with that, I'll dive right in. And like I said, you can call me out at the end if you did not learn anything. You just totally call me out. But so, I mean, I want to ground us in like what diversity really is all about. And it, like, again, we're really passionate about encouraging diversity of thought, but diversity itself is really, again, I love this quote. It's the art of thinking independently together. So it's those two things that we think maybe sometimes are mutually exclusive about being independent, but also being with others and as part of a group. So that's why I said, like, if it's a startup and that's the team that you're playing in, or if it's a small team in a large organization, or just a group of people coming together to just reach an outcome, that's think of that as an element of diversity and an opportunity for diversity, where the art of all of you thinking independently together comes to life. So how do you do this? I mentioned in the beginning, it's overwhelming and it's only getting harder. We often talk about at Diversify Thinking the dimensions of diversity, and by default, and you'll see a lot of the data I'll share with you today is based in this. By default, the de facto dimensions of diversity that we fall back on and really lean into is race and gender. So we often think about that. And why is that? Because it is honestly the things we see, right? And sometimes it's hard to quantify and define things that are not as visible to us. So race and gender, really easy to see. It's harder to see the religion someone practices potentially, unless there's something about their wardrobe that indicates that. It's harder to guess someone's age. Like, I don't recommend you do that. So there's other things that are a little bit like economic status, education, personality types. One of my passionate ones as well that I learned a lot about over the course of this last couple of years was neurodiversity. And that dimension of diversity is really pretty raw. There's not a lot of data talking about it in the element of diversity. But I have two nieces that are autistic, and I just, they're brilliant. And I think we often look at that as a handicapped or a disability, and it's really not. It's just another element of diversity and another place where people have unique needs that we need to support them in order to be inclusive. So lots of dimensions of diversity, not trying to overwhelm you, because I said I was going to make things easier for you, not harder, but there is a lot to it. So what you have to do first is define it in your own context. What does it mean to you, right? And what's important to you? What are your goals? So when I say, what are your goals? There's interesting goals out there that I hear a lot about, and I support these for obvious reasons. Things like, we're going to be 50-50 gender diverse by 2025. Well, that's awesome. And that is a very valiant goal to chase. And so I'm not saying you have to encompass all elements of diversity, but you also need to know what you're trying to do. Like, what is your outcome, so you can build a plan to get there. And that's another key takeaway I want you guys to remember today. It's about a plan. It's a program. It's not this thing that's going to happen over here by itself, or that it's going to be in charge of, one person to make sure it happens. The chief diversity inclusion officer at your organization, if you have one, is not going to own this by themselves. They may own promoting it, evangelizing it, being even pioneering it in some cases, but they can't do it alone. And this is kind of back to what I was saying about diversified thinking. We need everybody to come to the table. What's wrong with those silos? Well, there are those ERGs, or those safe spaces that we build for these different dimensions. Nothing's changing because we're not coming back together to think independently together. So step one, define it, but in your context. What is the most important part of diversity that you want to work on today? And then write it down, like literally write it down. I think that's some of the things that we gloss over. Write it down, just like your mission statement. It's that important. Like, what are you going to focus on? What does it mean to you? And what is the goal around it? And be clear. There's a new element to diversity, a new dimension. You could say that sort of arrived in the last year due to the pandemic. And I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, which is kind of geographic location. So it's the hybrid work model that we're all experiencing at some level, and definitely did when we were forced into it. And I think we're seeing that a lot of it's going to stay intact for good reason. The fact that you're in person or remote it's surfacing right now. We're seeing in our research and our conversations with startups and other organizations, it's becoming a challenge and creating inclusion issues and becoming yet another dimension of diversity. So it is very broad, but I'm not here to overwhelm you. I'm here to educate you. So the first step is define diversity in your context. So now you know what it is and what it means to you. So when do you start working on it? Well, today, because the only better time was yesterday. You're already kind of behind if you've taken one step forward. So we call this diversity debt. So for you technologists in the audience, I'm founded in 25 years of technology. So I started as an engineer, and I'm not going to lie to say that I didn't accrue some technical debt along the journey in my career. And so anyone that's been an engineer or even a product manager knows this looming thing called technical debt. And why do we have it? We have it because we have goals and we have milestones and we have deadlines. And sometimes you have to cut corners, because to do it the quote right way, or maybe the way that you'd be the most proud of, is going to take longer. And sometimes your stakeholders won't stand for that, and they have to have it done. So you cut corners to try to get things out. And you know what you always say? I'm going to go back and work on that. I'm going to go back and fix that. I'm here to tell you that you almost never do. You almost never get budget to go back and address technical debt. It's just a fact. I saw it much too often, and it's not unique to one business or another. And honestly, startups are not immune to it either. It can happen really fast and pile up really fast. Well, diversity is no different. Diversity is also able to build debt, right? And so what do I mean by that? It means as you grow, if you don't have intention and you haven't built the plan and you haven't done step one and define what diversity means to you for your context, then you're going to start to accrue debt. And that makes it more difficult. Now, is it hopeless? You know, I'm not, Melissa, are you telling me that if I'm part of a large company right now, that it's hopeless? We can never engage with a diverse group of candidates and pull them in? No, it's not hopeless, but you do have to be intentional and you have to build that plan. So don't accrue diversity debt is my message to you. Start now and be intentional about it. So you know what it is and you know when to start. Where do you start? I always say start at the top, right? So, and why is that? There's many reasons, highlighting of which your leadership team is who represents who you are out there to the world. And when I say that, I mean your customers. How diverse your leadership team attracts your customer base. Well, if you're all white males, guess who your customers are going to be? And this is true. I mean, there's studies around this, so I'm not making this up. And the more diverse your leadership team is, the more diverse your customer base will be. Well, that's just good business, right? So why would you want to pigeonhole yourself to a very specific market segment when you could have a much broader addressable market just by diversifying your leadership team? This is all founded in data. So that's one reason. It also is who you attract in terms of recruiting and talent acquisition, because I'm sure all of you have looked at the About Us page on a company that you're thinking about pursuing an opportunity with, or that you're being recruited for. And, you know, as me, if I'm seeing an all white male leadership team, I pause. You know, it's true. And so it's definitely, it affects who you attract as far as your talent and building your team. So there's an impact both on the business side with your customers, as well as the future growth of your team. And in general, leadership, their role is to set the direction and roadmap for your company. So as a startup, that's crucial. Two most important things to startups today are product market fit and generating revenue. This should not be a surprise, right? Most businesses, it's about generating revenue. Startups also are tasked with product market fit. They haven't found it yet. So only 26% of them make a deliberate effort to diversify leadership. 26%, that's a really small number. It actually makes me really sad. It's one of our missions of Diversify Thinking, is to make that number bigger. So hopefully I'll come back in a year and tell you that number is doubled based on work we're doing with startups. That's the dream. But diversity is more than a trend, right? And so we need to make intentional effort towards it. So you see this number 65%, and you might be wondering, she hasn't even said anything about this yet. And you're right. There's a couple different data points I want to touch here, which impact leadership teams, specifically, again, from the perspective of a startup. So 63% of startups that have at least one female founder versus all male founders, 63% have better valuations of their company. So what does that mean? That's what their company's actually worth to investors, right? So their sort of net worth as a company is 63% better if they have at least one female founder. Well, that's not a small number. It's not as small as 26% that's making an intentional effort to diversify leadership. So that's huge, right? 65%, the number you're looking at right now, have better valuations if they have at least one ethnically diverse founding member versus an all-white founding team. So just kind of think about that for a minute. That's a big number, and that's just on the leadership side. We haven't even got to the rest of the company. So your company is going to be worth more in the world right now. And this data, again, it's focused on gender and race, right? You can hear it from the stats I'm giving you, but that's because these are the two elements of diversity that we focus on. But this research comes from Gartner, McKinsey, et cetera, really because they're focused on trying to drive this point home in the effort of making people be more intentional around it. So define what it is, start today, and start at the top. So you need to start with hiring, right? How are you going to bring that and attract that a talent and diversify your leadership team? But you can't stop there. And even like in the recruiting aspects, it's really important. Again, like your leadership team being diverse is something that your recruits look at. 2/3, this is a big number, 2/3 of people out there looking for a job right now use diversity in whatever way, again, their own definition, right? We don't know what they're looking at, race, gender, et cetera, but they consider diversity and the company's values around diversity to be an important factor for going to that company. So here's another, you're going to lose out on candidates. Your pool is going to be really small if you're not representing some elements of diversity. So it matters. It matters for your business. It matters for recruiting, but you can't stop there. There's a gender decoder down here at the bottom. Happy to chat with anybody. We use this. This is a free version. There's lots of other decoders. I've even had someone after one of my talks share a racial decoder, looking for racial language, etc. What we use this for, you can use it for a lot of things, actually. You can essentially decode your website. You can decode anything that's public facing, that's representing your brand and who you are as a company. We were really surprised as a startup. Our job descriptions are pretty minimal. Why? Because our roles vary and we know that. So we want to make sure we're attracting talent that understands we have to have some flexibility and adaptability in our roles. So minimal language, like not really long job descriptions. But yet when we ran the gender decoder, we were surprised to learn there was a lot of masculine language. So that was kind of a surprise. Even with minimal language, it just shows that our English language is very masculine by default. So it means that it's going to affect who relates or it resonates with, and then they won't even apply. So you haven't even got their application in the pool. So this stuff matters. Words really, really matter. And we saw a huge increase. I mean, I say huge, but it was like, I think upwards of like 17%. That I feel like that's a pretty good big number in terms of like changing the pool that you're attracting. So definitely look into things like that and pay attention to the words that you're using, because it impacts who's applying. The other thing that I'll say from experience is, as a female, and I know I'm not alone because I've had a lot of people raise their hands. And if I could see all of you, I would say, raise your hand if you're a female and you've ever seen a job and you didn't meet 10 out of 10, or maybe even 11 out of 10, like one that you made up in your head of the requirements for that job. And you're like, oh, I can't do that. I had all these, but I'm missing that one. But if you're a male, raise your hand if you had 1 out of 10 and you still applied. Like there's also studies done around that. And it's interesting, but that's what we do. So that's why we minimize our job descriptions. So we don't have this like laundry list of requirements that's going to make someone not kind of see themselves in that role. So that stuff really does matter. And that's a very well-known fact that women do that. So if you're not seeing women apply in the first place and you're not able to attract that talent, look at your job descriptions, look at the language, and then look at like how long are they? Because some of those things, I wish I could tell you that we could remove the stigma overnight, but I don't think it's a reality. I don't think it's going to happen. So you define it, you start now, you start at the top, and then you start with hiring, and you make sure that you're inviting people in a place that feels like it represents a diverse environment and is inclusive. But then how do you keep them? I asked a poll at a previous talk, and I said, what's the biggest challenge that you feel you're having with DE&I right now, right? Because it's a challenge for everyone. Let's just be honest. There's nobody that's not challenged with this. But what would you say, it's hiring or retention? And I feel like there's a really big focus in the market right now to help people with hiring. There's all these small agencies that are popping up that are focused on diversity hiring. I think it's awesome. I love it. I actually met a co-founder of one just a couple days ago. But not as much on the retention side. Like, what are we doing to keep them there? You invite them in, but now do they feel like they belong? So that's when we're saying, like, what is inclusiveness? Like, what does inclusion actually mean? At Diversify Thinking, and what we portray as inclusion, it's maintaining curiosity, it's inviting challenge, and it's giving each individual what they uniquely need as far as support to be successful. So part of that is just paying attention and listening, right? And part of it is recognizing the differences. Remember, thinking differently, but together, and supporting that, inviting it. And that's why I say invite challenge, and that's not just a leadership problem to solve, right? So I say we lead from every chair. If you're sitting around a table or you're in a Zoom meeting and you can see everyone's faces, if Mary hasn't contributed for the last 30 minutes when there was an open forum or the potential, like, invite her to. Be curious about others' perspectives. Don't assume that you have all the information. You are not the only knowledge holder in the world, right? Like, so invite those perspectives. You might be surprised that when someone challenges you, you learn, and the outcome is so much better. How much better? Inclusive companies are 1.7 times more likely to be innovation leaders in their market. Again, not a small number, and it means something. So you'll actually be more likely to be an innovation leader in your market if you're creating this inclusive environment. Why is that? Because innovation doesn't come from complacency. It doesn't come from groupthink. Innovation doesn't come from everybody around the table agreeing with each other. Innovation comes out of conflict. It comes out of challenge. It comes out of sharing diverse perspectives and nailing like the right outcome. So you define it, you start now, you start at the top, you start with your recruiting and make sure your recruiting practices invite diversity. I'll write down to your job descriptions in your website and your leadership team, of course. And then once they're there, you make sure you create an environment that supports their unique needs and that you invite them to challenge you and you're curious along the way about their perspectives. So now you've done all of these things. How do you know if you've done it right? How do you know if you're actually making progress? Well, back in step one, you should also know where you're coming from, right? So get real about your stats and measure. If your goal was to be 50-50 gender diverse by 2025, what are you at now? Is it 90-10 female, male to female? Is it 75-25? Like, what are you at now? You're not going to know if you get to 50-50 if you don't know where you're at now. And you won't be able to build a good plan because maybe you're closer than you actually thought if that was your goal. So measure. Pay attention to trends that happen in your organization. And when I say that, I'll give you a few examples. What are the last 5 people that you hired? What did they look like? Like, what dimension of diversity did they encompass? Is it aligned with your definition? Are you actually being intentional about hiring? Are they all white males? You know, are they all white females? Like, what does it look like? Be real about that. Pay attention to the last 5 people that were promoted, because perhaps we're missing out on advancement opportunities for different dimensions of diversity. And there's something that's speaking to being more inclusive and inviting challenge and opportunities within your organization, because only the 5 white males or the 5 white females or whatever that is got promoted because they were speaking up in meetings and being heard, and no one was inviting others. This one's really important and speaks to obviously retention as an issue, and which I've heard most recently is the burning issue out there, especially for startups. Were the last 5 people that left, were they all female? You know, perhaps there's something to look at and be learned there. Maybe that's where you need to focus your next goal on. So measure all of those things. And so it's not going to be a surprise to you when I boil down some takeaways from today. Step 1 is define diversity, but for you and your context for your organization right now, and know that that can change. It's really like there's a point in time, like I mentioned the goal of 50-50 by 2025. Well, what happens after 2025? You just stop? No, you have a new goal, right? You have a new goal and you build a new plan and you take it seriously, just like you do other parts of your business. Avoid diversity debt. This is real and it happens quickly, just like technical debt. And we say we're going to go back, but we don't ever have the funding, opportunity, or support to do that in reality. Start with leadership. And then once you've invited a diverse candidate pool into your organization, invite challenge as well from them. And then measure, because what you want to improve on, you won't know if you haven't measured it, and write it down and track those things. And then rinse and repeat. This is a cycle. This is not a one and done, set it and forget it type of exchange. You're going to have to keep doing this because your business is going to evolve over time. People will leave, you know, those 5 people will leave. What happens to your diversity based on your definition after those 5 people leave? What work do you have to do? It'll help you set the next goals. So those are my takeaways for you today. Again, I'm Melissa Jerkois, really excited to be able to share this information with you. What we do at Diversify Thinking is really try to, again, connect with other startups around how to help them in the areas of inclusion. So we're working on a beta program right now. If you are interested at all in taking a deep dive with us into those strategies and kind of learning together, again, thinking differently, but together, would love to have you. If you take a snap of this link tree, it'll have all the right ways to get in touch with me, as well as putting your name in for the beta program. And happy to take any questions if there are any.
That was amazing. Go on, Erica, sorry.
No, I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say thank you so much. That was a really great presentation.
Thank you. I'm glad. Hopefully you guys learned something. Keep me honest.
I'm actually going to, I'm going to ask a question really quick if you don't mind. So you talked about the gender decoder that you had on one of your previous slides and how you found that there was a lot of masculine language used in your job descriptions. I was wondering who wrote those job descriptions?
A woman.
It's so interesting. Like,
not just a woman, an LGBTQ woman. This is like, that's what I'm saying. Like, right, we were pretty surprised, and our job descriptions are pretty short and succinct, and don't have, like, what I say is like the 10 requirements that you must have in order to apply to the job, that really, us as women will look at that and be like, oh, I don't have all of them, plus some I just made up in my head, so I'm not going to apply to that. So yeah, it's really our language, right? It's not even, I'm sure if a man had written those, they probably would have been even more masculine. But just our language in general is surprisingly masculine by default. So you sort of have to, like, again, it's really intentional to take a look at those things. And I would just recommend using that because it's free, because I think you might be really surprised by what you learn. Like looking at language you have on your website, language you blog, in your blogs, or even like social media posts, like small sections of language. Is there something that you're saying there that's like sort of exuding something that's not inviting to a particular dimension of diversity that you're trying to attract? So it's really interesting. But there are lots of other decoders. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on decoders, but I put that one out there because we have experience with it. But recommend like exploring those things. I think it's definitely a learning journey for that.
I found that, I found that so interesting what you're talking about, sort of related to the same point what Erica was just saying as well. Because when you said, so women will traditionally look at this list of 10 objectives in a job description and won't apply for it, but a man would look at one and apply, and it just hit me. It really did, because I was like, I would. I have. So if I see a job description with 15 points and I hit 3 of them, I have applied to them before. I'll just learn it on the job. And it also really resonated with me, because I do a lot for sort of helping career changers come into the technology industry. And the technology industry is absolutely horrendous for having big shopping lists of requirements for new entries, you need to know this, you need to know that, you need to know this and everything. So it was really interesting to hear about what you're saying about the masculine words as well, because I can only imagine that I know quite a few gentlemen that I've helped who were scared to apply to jobs. So I can only imagine how much more it would be for women as well, just based on what you've just said. Which I found really interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely generalizing, but it is my own experience. And when I talk to other people, like they will raise their hands. Like everyone's like, oh, I've so done that. I'm like, yeah, we do.
I know, I'm guilty of that myself too. Thank you, Melissa. True. That was so interesting. I do have another question, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So you mentioned yourself the 63%. If you have a woman on the leadership team, that's a huge amount. Or and the 65 with an ethnic diverse leadership team. It seems like a no-brainer to look for co-founders that are different from you.
Yeah.
Do you think when people have these startup ideas and they're looking for co-founders, do they tend to gravitate to people that are like them?
I think they do. I think it's just sort of the data is starting to push people in a different direction, which is opening their eyes to, oh, this actually has a financial impact to the success of my company. And like, will an investor give me money or not? Right. I'm more likely to get this money. I think it's also human nature you're battling, because we as humans want to be with people like us. Like, again, that's why like-minded as a phrase is used so frequently, because we feel comfortable with people that look and act like us. That's how we feel comfortable. So I'm always like, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where growth and success lives. When you're comfortable all the time, that's complacency, and you're not going to grow there. That's just not. You're not going to push yourself, and your company's not going to grow, right? So I think people do. It does feel like a no-brainer because the number's not small, and so I'm always like, it's right here. I mean, the other aspect is, there is this idea of, well, there's not enough women in the pipeline, which I'm a little tired of the pipeline issue, because I feel like I know a lot of women that are really, really intelligent. I feel like there is a pipeline. I think part of it is Melinda Gates did this in a talk quite a few years ago, but she said, kind of called BS on the pipeline and said, it's not a pipeline issue, it's a pathways issue. And I was like, yes, it's a pathways issue, which means what do we have to do as a society and as each organization, startups included, we have to create pathways for either existing people on the team that we just are kind of ignoring and not inviting them to the table, or for the general market. Like, are we creating an environment where a woman that might be risk adverse because she's a mom of 3 and, you know, doesn't feel like she could join a startup, are we creating an environment where she feels like she can take that risk? Because that's what we need, right? And the businesses need it. I mean, again, like 63% just for have one female in the founding team. So I feel like, well, it probably behooves you to make an environment where she feels as though she can do that, right? That even though it's a risk, you have to kind of have some less risk aversion to join a startup. Like, how do you create that? So I think, yes, human nature makes us want to gravitate towards those that are like us. It's just, so it's, and society, there's societal bias around that too. So sort of, it sounds so like, how could you not do it? But it's hard. It's just, I mean, it's hard. And then I'll tell you, as a leader, managing a team of diverse people, it's a heck of a lot harder than managing a team of people that are all like you, right? Because they are going to challenge you, because they are going to make you stay on your toes, but I love that. So, but maybe I'm unique sometimes in that way, right? Like, there's some managers that don't want that. Like, that's a lot harder than managing a team. So I think it's just, you know, it's a much more difficult, challenging path, but it's so much more rewarding, right? So, and the numbers show that too, right? Both beneficial financially, as well as just, you know, it's not just about being morally good here, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, there's a definite business impact, you know?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think just like on them 2 terms that you mentioned as well, I think even before you started your talk, you said them terms, just like us and like-minded, and how much you sort of hate, or I shouldn't say hate, a bit of a strong word, but how much you sort of don't appreciate those terms. And I really get where you're coming from, because as a person of color, I've been in places before where I've worked in companies before, and the things that they've said to me is like, you're just like us, and you really don't know how to take that, because I don't want to be just like you. I want to be like me. So I don't know whether that's inviting or insulting at the same time. But it's really nice what you said about sort of accepting and having them challenging diverse teams and what they can bring.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad. So it sounds like I did my job here today. So I'm happy. So again, reach out to me if you're interested in participating with our beta program that we're pulling together. The details are coming soon. Or just want to, you know, reach out and talk about all things diversity or technology, because I'm a little bit of a geek there too. So.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Melissa. It was great to have you here today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next speaker is Anuradha Kumari. Anuradha is a media development expert, and she's passionate about using technology to improve inclusion. Welcome, Anuradha.
Hey, hi everyone. Thanks
Hey.
for having me here.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you all? I really enjoyed the talk by Melissa. It was really very helpful and some nice pointers in there.
It was really interesting. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm glad that I'm here today. I'm honored.
Absolutely.
It seems like a great transition, because one of the last things that Melissa was saying was you need to have the data, you need to see the data, and now we're moving straight into accessible information and data visualization. It's like,
well, without delaying you further, we'll let you go ahead and share your slides.
Yes. I just shared my slides.
Perfect. Okay, over to you.
Yes. Just a question. Is it echoing or something? Because I'm sharing audio also, and it's telling me that audience might hear some echo.
I'm not getting any echo. We can see when it gets to that slide, and we can let you know. We'll jump in. Okay.
Sure. So, yeah. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Anuradha Kumari, and today we are going to discuss about accessible information and data visualization. Let's get started. A little bit of introduction about myself. I'm working as a front-end consultant at Passionate People. I'm also media developer expert with Cloudinary. I'm an accessibility advocate, and if you would like to discuss anything or if you would have any questions afterwards when you are watching this stream, you can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn at Anuradha15 or on Twitter at miracle_404. I would be glad to have a chat around accessibility and tech with you all. So, the topics which we are going to cover today, we will start with an introduction of accessibility. I will not dive deep into it because in my yesterday's talk in the web track, I had already covered a lot about basics of accessibility and importance. So if you want to deep dive into it, you can definitely check it out. We will keep that introduction part short today so that we cover other topics. Then we will move to see what is information, how do we share, and how can we make information and data visualization accessible, some of the tools and resources which will help us achieve these things. The first question always, what exactly is accessibility? Accessibility, which is also neuronamed as A11Y. Here 11 refers to the number of letters between A and Y in accessibility, and it means making resources and services usable by everyone regardless of their ability or disability. So today we are talking about information and data visualization. So the first thing is, what exactly is information, or what are the different types of information? So we have data all around us. Now, information is presenting data in a way that people can understand things from it. So it can be of different types, like it could be in text format. It could be in image format. There are different images which are circulated, and we pass on information in those. Then it could be in form of audio, like people could also have, like podcast is also one kind of information only, and it's a form of audio. Video format, like which we are having today right now, this is a video format of sharing information. And since there are different types of information, so there are different ways in which we can share the information with people. Like there are online resources, we can share all information online, websites, Twitter, LinkedIn, social media, anything. There's also print medium to share information. You can print your information in newspaper, print out banners, and so on. Then audios and videos. Then there are electronics documents, like there are PDF, there are CSV files. These are very nice type of documents where we can share the information with users, like huge amount of information. What exactly is data visualization? It's actually you have lots of data and you are graphically representing that data, and that our graphical representation, it uses the visual elements, like it uses pie charts, graphs, tables, etc., to represent different patterns and trends of that data. So what are different patterns of that data, some kind of trend, so that it all makes sense. The huge amount data represented in a way that it makes sense to the users. Now, data visualization is in itself a form of accessibility, because just imagine you have a huge table with maybe 100 of columns and 1,000 and 10,000 of rows of data. So how overwhelmed will you be when you are trying to go through that data and making a sense of it? But if we represent it in, let's say, some form of charts or graphs, it suddenly makes more sense, right? So it reduces lots of cognitive load from users. So data visualization is itself a form of accessible way of representing data, right? Now we are going to see today how can we make it accessible for all different types of users, like disabled people, people who are maybe having cognitive disability, they have color blindness, some sight disability. So how do we make this all information and data visualization accessible to those users? Okay. So before I start into giving all the tips and information how to make this accessible, I would like to start with this statement that accessibility should be the core goal of information and data visualization. Everything we share today, everywhere, information is everywhere. We are using lots of data visualization, and hence we must always think from accessibility perspective when we are building these. So accessible information is type of information that can be perceived and understood by users via any of their senses. Like if they can see and understand. If they only rely on hearing, they could hear the information and understand what we are trying to inform them. Or like touch, like there are braille systems and all, so they should be able to understand and perceive that information in any form of their senses. Let's see some of the tips of accessible information. The first thing is using clear and simple language whenever we are writing anything, any type of like article or audio, video, any different type of information. It should be written in clear and concise and like simple language. So what should we do? Using active verbs is always preferred over passive verbs when we are trying to relay any information. Like let's for example, we will provide. It sounds much better and it's more understandable than if we go into passive voice like it will be provided and so on. So more use of active verbs is preferred. When we are trying to say anything, one sentence should only contain maybe one point so that it's clear. And also if we have multiple ideas to present, we can dedicate one idea in one paragraph and not mix multiple ideas in one paragraph so that people get confused what not to do. So we should avoid writing just jargons and abbreviations. So you can use abbreviation, but make sure that you also provide the full form for the people who might be new to it. You don't know who is reading your information. So you should always have a place where you are trying to expand it and trying to let them know that what this jargon or what this abbreviation represents. Then using very long sentences might be very overwhelming for people with cognitive disabilities. They might not be able to understand what we are trying to say. Or using unnecessary filler words. If we use it a lot, it might also overwhelm our users. Then font style and size. This is only for like text or any written kind of information anywhere in print or on online medium anywhere. The font size and styling should be as such that it's readable by everyone. Let's see like what we can use. Fonts should be like clear fonts, readable fonts, and also it should not be very small, at least have some standard. 12 points is considered as a standard font size, but actually I prefer 14 and above because they are more readable, which I feel. Color contrast of the text should be good so that users are able to read the text. Proper punctuation is really important to relay the right information, because if we end up messing with punctuation, it might totally change the meaning of that information. Also, the spacing between line and paragraphs should be as such that they are distinguishable and people can read them properly. And if we have like, let's say we have 5 paragraphs for something, then if we have some important information in that, we can use bold text to emphasize those keywords, those important keywords. So they will come out to the user and they can scan through it and understand what they are looking for. What to avoid when we are writing? Yeah, all uppercase letters. Definitely we should avoid all uppercase letters because it's hard to read. Also it's more overwhelming to read, and also if we are writing in upper cases, screen readers also cannot understand what that word is. So it's difficult for screen readers to understand and pronounce it rightly to the users who are using them. If we are using very tangled and quite a lot cursive font styles, so it might be hard for some people to understand and make out what those words and letters are. So if we are very stretched, like a lot of spaces between each letter, it also makes it hard to read. And if we have very much squeezed words, so in a word all the letters are quite squeezed, it also makes it quite difficult to read and understand those words. Let's see some example. So like this is a very small font size. Now the other line here, the color contrast is really very low. So people who have less sight, they won't be able to make out what are those colors and what are those letters. Then this is a example of not so accessible font style. And a good example could be writing in big letters and a very nice spacing between lines, nice spacing between paragraphs. And if we have some important keywords, we are like embolding them so that you can read and your eye will go straight to that. And those are like important points which I want to highlight. Providing alternative format. So because people might be using different ways to see our information or check our information and those data visualizations. So we should always provide alternative formats. For example, if we have lots of images, or if we are providing something images for people to understand, then what if the person cannot see? They won't be able to see, so they won't be able to understand. So we must always provide alternative text for our images. But if your images are like purely decorative and they don't contain any information, then provide an empty alt text so that screen readers or assistive technologies, they skip that image and they do not pronounce. Let's say if you don't pronounce alt, then in some platforms, some screen readers, they end up reading the path of the image, which definitely won't make any sense to the user. So yeah, always provide alt text for images. Then if we have videos, video resources, they must be captioned. It does not only help the people who cannot hear, it also helps people who are coming from different language background, or if they are watching videos which is not their first language, in first language. So captioning videos helps lots of people. Same for audio. So if we have audios, we must have a transcription for it so that a person can choose to read it out if they cannot hear, or they are unable to hear it in that situation. Then if sometimes it's it's not possible to keep it all easy, your content. In that case, what you can do, you can provide, if you have very complex information or complex things in your content, what we can do, we can provide an easy to read version. So we can offer the user that, hey, if you want to read an easy to read version of it, please go ahead, you can provide a link there. And if the users go there, the data or the information is in simplified words there and in simplified language, so it's accessible for them as well. Let's see now some of the accessible data visualization examples. Adding titles. So whenever we are creating any kind of data viz, so we are having a graph or bar charts, anything, so having a title really helps, because when user is looking at that particular chart or anything, so first thing they will look at is the title. So make sure that we have a descriptive title which explains the user what this specific chart is about. So depending upon that title, the user can decide to maybe check it out or not check it out, but they get a holistic idea of what that chart will be about. So for example, in this chart, if we don't have this title, then it looks like, okay, this is a chart between number of students and there is this sports. We will have to read all the x axis and y axis details to understand what is this chart all about. But by writing a title here, a descriptive title here, it reduces cognitive load of the users coming here, and they will understand that, okay, this is going to be a chart about sports played by students of XYZ school, and it really helps the users. Providing all text. So if we are using images and all, we must provide all text, of course. And what we can do there is, you can provide a short description. If you are like showing images with pie charts, you can in the all text provide a short description of what that visualization is. Now sometimes you might be using heavy data to create that and show some anything, charts or pie charts, anything. In that case, what we can do, let's say we are not able to describe it between 1 or 2 lines, or we are not able to provide all information in that short description, we can create a table with that data, or maybe some file like CSV file with that data, and provide a link of that table or CSV just besides it, so that user can choose to go to that link and better understand that data. So here what I want to show is, let me go to the example and show you how it looks when we don't have proper alt text for our data visualization. So here in this example, this person, they are trying to use voiceover on mobile, and this is the guardian, and they are trying to use voiceover to read the different US state results for the elections which just went by. If a person who is just using voiceover, so maybe I cannot see, I'm totally reliant on that voiceover to understand. So let's see how it sounds.
Image, 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 image. One face, image, image.
So they are trying to go through all the states to maybe understand what is the status of result, but all it pronounces is image, 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 because there were no all description of all those different images. Now, what will user figure out from this? So this is one of really very nice examples to understand why all description is so important. So whenever we are creating something, we should not rely only on colors to relay some information or to convey some information. Always label that data. So that data should, if you use colors, always use colors you want, but label the data so that a persons who cannot really distinguish between colors, there are different types of color blindness, and people might perceive colors in a different way. So for them, it will be really difficult to understand if the data is totally reliant on colors. So for example, let's say this one here. If you see, we have these data lines here, and they have a legend which says that this blue is blueberry, red is raspberry, and the green is grapes. Now I want to show you something. Let me, yeah. So okay, we have this extension is Firefox No Coffee Vision Simulator. It's very nice way to simulate different type of color blindness and see what they would be seeing this. So this is what a person with normal sight could see, but a person with different types of color blindness, let's go to one of them called deuteranopia. So if you see, the colors just change, but still I can understand that still the colors are visible. There are 3 different colors I can see, so maybe I can still understand which one belongs to blueberry, which one belongs to grapes, and so on. But there is this condition called achromatopsia. Here the person can see only in shades of gray, like black and white. So now it's very difficult to understand which one of the lines belong to which of the fruits here. So now in a right example, if you can see, it's directly labeled. These lines are now directly labeled. So I don't need to understand colors in order to make out what these colors, what this information is about, what this data is about. So this is a much better way to understand how how we should not only rely on colors. Let's go to next one. I think I have more with the examples. I'll just keep it like this. Present. Okay, so always directly labels the data. Using white spaces. So when the information which we saw, it's quite squeezed in, or there's lots of details there. So again, user might become overwhelmed. So like in this example, all the colors are side by side. There is no spacing between them. Then again, it might be difficult for a person with color blindness to use it. Escape. Yeah. So, and in the right, if you see, I have a small white divider between these different colors. So it makes it more visible that where one color stops and where the other color starts, or the data stops and starts. And if we try to simulate again this color blindness, you can see that this is much better when you have a white divider in between, and especially when the light colors are side by side, then it's not very distinct that when one color stops, when one color starts. I guess some different example. Yeah, like in this one, it's very hard to find out when the first color stopped and second color start. But if we have a white space between these, a very small white space, it makes it very clear. The distinction is quite clear. So yeah, having a white space really helps. Using proper color contrast. So if we have low color contrast, like between background and foreground color, if there is no much difference, then it's very difficult for users to understand what that data is all about. And also, if we are using very bright colors, it can also be overwhelming for users which have some sensory issues. So for example, this one has very less color contrast, so it might be difficult for people to understand, but having proper color and color contrast really helps. So keyboard accessibility. Many times we provide some kind of interactions on hover on our data or data points, but we must also provide keyboard accessibility. Like users must also be able to perform those actions when they are using keyboards. So they also should be able to navigate via assistive technologies like keyboard and screen readers. That's why we must not always put information only on hover. And if possible, always we should provide an alternative data source, which is machine readable, maybe some sort of like table or CSV, which we just discussed. Animation. So we use lots of animations, but animations might be disturbing for different types of users. So we must always respect user device settings. In every user device, there is a way to stop animations. Like a user does not want to see animation, they can go ahead and say that, hey, I don't want to see animation. In those cases, we must respect the user's device settings, and we must not show animation to them and show maybe some still image or something in place of that animation. So yeah, and we have a CSS media query for it, which is called prefers reduce motion. Let's see a quick example of that. So this Explore Alley is a website which I created where I curate some of the examples of accessibility. So here there is one example for animation. Now I have two examples of very simple animations, and both are animating because I don't have any settings that I do not want to see animation. But I am on my Windows, and if I go ahead and search that animation settings, so and here I would like to go and say that, hey, I do not want to see animations in my Windows. Okay, so when I stop it, what should happen is if you see the accessible example, the animation just stopped, but the inaccessible one, the animation was still playing, although I have told clearly that I do not want to see animation. So to honor the user settings, we have to write some extra code. It doesn't come by default, so we can have CSS media queries called prefer reduce motion, and if user has no preference, then only we should go ahead and add animation classes to our animations so that they get animated. And I also have a bonus section for today, social media accessibility, because we share lots of information on social media, so we must know how we can take care of accessibility while we are sharing information on social media. So first thing is using link shortener. So we share a lot of links, but if links are too long, the screen reader will pronounce it like a long way, so it's not very much understandable by users. So we can use short links, and it also helps, if you are on Twitter, it helps with your word count as well. If we are using images in all platforms, there is a way to add all text. So always add all text for images so that users can understand what that image is about if they cannot see. Captions for videos. Yeah, emoji uses, this is like a very important thing. You should use emojis, definitely. I also use, I'm a huge fan of emojis, but limit the uses, as in if in one place don't add like 10 emojis. Or some people I see that they use a word then emoji, word then emoji. Now this does not sound good when someone is using voiceover, so they cannot understand what exactly the text is if we over use the emojis, or we use lots of emojis in just one place. So limit the uses of emoji. Also, for hashtags, we must always use Pascal casing. Pascal casing means capitalizing every letter of every single word in your hashtag. So if you see an example here, this hashtag, easy to read and accessible, this you see and you figure out that, okay, what this word is. But if everything is small letters, it's very hard to understand, and it's very hard for machines as well. If screen readers or voiceovers are reading this, if it's Pascal case, they are able to understand what each different word is. But if it's all in small caps, it's very difficult to understand what that word is, right? So use Pascal case for hashtags. Okay, now I've just listed some of the tools and extensions which we can use to test for accessibility. So we have Lighthouse and Axe extension in our browser DevTools. Then we have Wave, which is a Chrome extension or a browser extension which we can install and check for accessibility. And we just saw on No Coffee how to simulate different kinds of color blindness and via No Coffee simulator. So these are very nice tools which we can use to test for accessibility. Then there are different color contrast tools which I have listed just in case you would need it, because so we can test for contrast in our different content via these tools. These are WCAG references. WCAG means Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So these are the official guidelines of accessibility. And I have listed these specific ones because they correspond to information and data visualization part of things. So how to make them accessible, like text alternatives, how to make non-text content like captions for videos, information and relationship between different parts of information, and how to use colors properly. So I have provided these references so that you can read it if you would want and dive deeper into it. These were the resources. These resources are listed. I use them to create this presentation and learn more about accessibility in data visualization. So to summarize, access to information is right for every person. Whenever we are creating anything, we must always think from accessibility perspective. Use accessible colors, contrast, fonts, spacing, sizes, and if you have any type of media, provide an alternative format for that so every type of user can get access to that information, and always test your content with real users. I also have a request, or rather an action item for all of you. If we have learned anything today, please pass on the learning and let's spread the awareness around accessibility and how can we create more inclusive and accessible web. So you can scan the QR code here, or you can visit the link t.ly/IFSO, and you will get all the resources for this talk. Also, I will paste this so that this is provided to you in the chat as well, and you can access the slides from there. Thank you. So I'm done. Yes.
Thank you so much, Radha.
Thank
That was
you.
so interesting. I feel like I learned so much in that short talk. It was just packed full of useful information, and the animation thing, I'd never seen anything like that. I didn't even know those settings existed. So thank you for sharing.
Yes. Yeah, I have found out that the most of inaccessibility is only because people don't know about it. Otherwise, they will definitely use it.
I think in my experience, my first job in this industry was a mobile software engineer for a bank. And that was sort of my first exposure to accessibility when we were implementing screen readers into the banking app, and also visual impairment for color blindness. And I found it really, really interesting. And I think it's one of those areas where it's a bit more pushed to the side. But do you feel that we're creating a level of technical debt, or do you think that the rate of technology is keeping up with accessibility?
I always see that, I mean, there are tools, there are resources, and which we can use. And if you develop, so you have developed mobile applications, and I'm as a front-end developer, so I have realized that if we follow proper coding guidelines, like proper tags, proper things, then most of the things will be accessible by default. Where we lack is that we end up not using it the right way, like maybe using divs everywhere and not using a semantic HTML. That is a very classic example. So we have everywhere tools on social media. We have everywhere a way to add alt text, but it's very rare that people add alt text there. So I mean, there are tools, there are ways in which we can make it, but it's on us now that how we make use of it and how we make things accessible.
Yeah, that's right. It's such an interesting subject, and it's so expansive. It does make me wonder at the rate of technology and how fast it goes. That I'm hoping that it does, that the rate of accessibility keeps up with that as well.
Yeah, it's totally up to us, because I think these accessibility is something which definitely should not be optional the way we have done it. And if everyone really takes it up that whatever we are creating, we always think about accessibility. So now all the new frameworks or libraries which are coming, it's very much focused on accessibility. So if you see now, all these modern frameworks, they have these accessibility statements, like how to make things accessible, and some examples on how to use and what to use, so that you end up making accessible things. I know people are now knowing more and more about accessibility. There is still lots to do in this space, because I mean, more than 95% of websites are inaccessible, but still we are talking now and we are sharing things. So I really hope to see it in a better phase in coming years.
Yeah, fingers crossed, definitely.
Yes.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Anuradha. That was a fantastic talk. We really appreciate you sharing with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the resources. That's such a fantastic collection that you've got on the website. It's amazing.
Yeah. I was learning about accessibility, so I ended up creating it so that it helps others who might need it.
Very cool.
Definitely. Okay. Ishak, over to you then. Thank you so much again, Anuradha.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Fantastic. So I think our next and final speaker is Kate, who unfortunately couldn't be with us here live, but she has sent us in a video for us to watch. Kate is the creative lead at Google Brand Studios, and she has a lot of experience in communications and design. So it's going to be absolutely fantastic to see what she's got for us. And I'm going to pop that on now. Fantastic. And the talk is on designing an inclusive future for the web.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Baker. I'm a creative lead at Google Brand Studio in London, and I'm here to talk to you today about designing a more inclusive future for the web. Now, this is an entry-level accessibility talk. Some of you may be familiar with the field, others will be discovering it for the first time. But essentially, what we're talking about with accessibility is designing for human diversity and how we can be more mindful of that as designers and makers. Now, obviously, that's a really broad area because human beings are an endlessly diverse bunch. So today we're going to start very simply. We're going to talk about one particular project that the Brand Studio launched earlier this year for blind and low vision users in particular. Now, the tips and guidance included will hopefully be useful for lots of different creatives and makers with different disciplines: writers, designers, filmmakers, producers, developers. We're going to discuss broad concepts rather than technical guidance. So hopefully these tips are interesting and easy to apply no matter what your personal discipline is. Okay, so let's get started with a little bit of background context. It may surprise you to know that 300 million people in the world have a vision impairment. That number actually inflates to 2.2 billion if you count all of the people with eyeglasses like myself. But 300 million is the number of people with a severe visual impairment that significantly affects their day-to-day experience of the world. And yet 97% of websites do not meet standard accessibility requirements. And by that, we mean the technical guidelines that a web developer will follow in order to make a web page readable for assistive technologies. Now, for those who aren't familiar, people with visual disabilities may be using one of a number of assistive devices to navigate your web page. For those with visual disabilities, these include things like Braille readers, which is a piece of hardware that turns the content of a web page into refreshable lines of Braille, screen magnifiers, which enable the user to punch all the way into the detail of a web page without breaking the design. And by far the most common is a screen reader, which essentially enables a completely blind user to listen to the web instead of reading it. Now, this is an example of a screen reader in action.
Skip the content. Banner region. RNIB home link. Donate button. Search this site. Search region. Search this site. Edit. Search. Enter the terms you wish to search for. Type in text. Go button. Navigation region. List of 3 items. Link supporting you. Link connecting communities. Link changing society. List end. Navigation region end. Navigation region. Link RNIB helpline 0303 123 9999. Navigation region. List of 9 items. Link coronavirus updates. Link about us. Enter. Navigation region. Navigation region. List with 9 items. About us link. About us dash RNI. Heading level 1 about us in this section button collapse.
So you get the idea. Screen readers rely on linear object-by-object navigation through a website. They read the screen from top to bottom, left to right, or in whichever alternative order the developer has specified. But someone using one of these devices may not be able to just scan a web page quickly, as you might with the human eye and the free-flowing nature of a computer mouse. To get an idea of what's there and the function of the website, it can take a lot longer to navigate. And bear in mind that this example shows the website of the Royal National Institute of Blind People. So this is designed to work exceptionally well for screen reader. You can imagine navigating a more cluttered website in this fashion can be incredibly laborious, incredibly frustrating. Say, for example, sifting through a publisher's website where there may be hundreds of news story headlines every day. Trying to find the story that you're looking for can be very laborious. And in fact, indeed, listening to the story itself in this style is not necessarily the most enjoyable human experience. So even when you have made a site technically accessible for an assistive device, that doesn't necessarily mean you've guaranteed your user a good experience. And of course, it's not just completely blind users that we should be thinking about. There are many different kinds of visual disabilities. There's restricted fields of vision where just certain areas might be obscured. There's light sensitivity, there's blurred vision, there's faded color vision, motion sensitivity, all the way through to more minor conditions like color affected vision. And what's clear is that a one-size-fits-all approach to web design doesn't work for everyone. Now, the further we got into research on this project and the more people with different kinds of visual disability that we spoke to, the more problems we uncovered. These are just a few examples of the kind of comments we began hearing from users when we started the research process. One blind collaborator said, screen readers mispronounce things, the cadence is off, they strip all of the humanity out of a sensitive piece of storytelling. Another collaborator with photophobia said, looking at bright screens gives me headaches. By the end of the day, I feel exhausted. And another user with blurred vision said sometimes I have to zoom in so far that the page design breaks. I end up swimming in white space, scrubbing back and forth, and losing my place every time. Now, what became clear is that the internet, which was designed predominantly by sighted designers, is inherently biased towards sighted users. That's nobody's fault. That's just the way things happened. So we decided to try out an experiment. And on Global Accessibility Awareness Day in 2021, we got together with the Royal National Institute of Blind People and The Guardian to launch Auditorial, an experiment in storytelling that can adapt to suit blind and low vision readers. Essentially a storytelling website that can customize the story to suit the sensory needs and preferences of the user. So all in all, we introduced 22 visual and audio controls, which enable the user to experience the same story in over 100 different ways. So you can read it as a standard text-based article, you can listen to it, you can watch it, and you can customize every feature to suit you. So if you have severely restricted vision, you can listen via the audio version. If you have really sensitive hearing, as most totally blind users do, you can strip out ambient background noise and focus on the narrator's voice. If you have a light sensitivity, you can flip between 6 different colorways, including 3 different dark modes. If you have a motion sensitivity, you can turn all motion graphics into static versions of themselves. If you have faded color vision, you can enhance imagery to make it crisper and higher contrast, and so on and so forth. There were many of these features, but the basic premise was taking a less one-size-fits-all approach and simply offering the user a choice of how they'd like to experience the story based on their personal sensory needs. Now, for some people, that just made the experience more comfortable or more fun. And for others, that was the difference between being able to access the information and not being able to get access to it. So the launch story here is called The Silent Spring. It was written by The Guardian, and it's about Bernie Krause, who you can see in the top center frame there, who's a soundscape ecologist. He's been traveling the world for 50 years, monitoring the effects of climate change through sound. So we were working with a really rich audio story with blind audiences in mind, but there are really basic lo-fi premises and lessons that we picked up along the way while doing this project that can be applied across all storytelling work and to web design projects at large to make them more inclusive. So I'm going to go through some of those top tips now. If there's one lesson you take away, let it be this mindset. Offer multiple formats. Inclusive design is about never assuming one size fits all. Offering different ways of experiencing information keeps it available for those who might struggle with a particular format. So before you launch anything, make sure you've considered what this experience would be like if you couldn't use your eyes or your ears, for example. If you're producing a piece of editorial, consider recording it. If you're producing a podcast, make sure it's available as a transcript. And this is known as multimodal design. My second top tip is just get to know your users. You'll never design an experience that works perfectly for every human being on the planet. But what you can do is keep the primary users you're designing for close to the process, from conception through the design process, through the writing process, and into development. And this will really help you to remove your own bias from the process. Now, I was amazed when working on Auditorial at how hung up on visual details a sighted design team can get. This is a really hard thing to unlearn. And so for Auditorial, we had blind and low vision users embedded in our creative team from the beginning, validating concepts, working through design proposals, and helping us to unbias our workflow and prioritize the things that actually matter. So find yourself a project expert. record an audio version. So something as simple as recording your article being read aloud significantly enhances the humanity of the storytelling for screen reader users. Screen reader technology relies on synthetic speech, which will mispronounce words, mess up the cadence of the writing, and flatten the emotion of a really sensitive piece of storytelling that your journalist just spent a long time writing. A human narrator can deliver the story the way the writer intended. And this can be very lo-fi. This doesn't have to be high production value. Just your journalist recording a simple MP3 is game-changing for the blind audience. Make introductions. So when interviewing subjects, remember that either the narrator, the presenter, or the interviewee themselves will need to introduce themselves audibly for blind users, as graphic labeling is inaccessible to those with sight loss. And this was something that we heard countless times from blind users. Film is the major culprit for this. There's always an assumption made that someone can see the screen. And so people just start talking without introducing themselves. And as a result, if you are blind or have reduced vision, sometimes it's really difficult to contextualize the speaker. Don't rely on the visual generally is good advice. For auditorial, we developed what we were calling holistic audio, which is very simply just producing your audio in a way that explains itself entirely and layering in visual descriptions where necessary, so that it doesn't matter if you can see the screen or not. Really simple test is just to close your eyes and check, does your story or experience still make sense? You can see an example here of how The Guardian approached weaving visual description into the flow of their article.
These changes can be laid out on a spectrogram, a visual representation of the sounds. The spectrogram shows the sound recording of the whole ecosystem in one single image. The higher the frequency of any sound, the higher it is on the spectrogram. The louder a sound, the more intense the color is.
So there you see the visual description doesn't just spell things out for those who can't see the screen, it actually also makes things clearer for those who can. So there's often a double benefit to some of these practices. And it's just simply a case of checking if you can't see the imagery, if you can't see the film, is the context still clear? If you can't see that there's a kettle boiling in that scene of the film, could the sound be mistaken for something else, like heavy rain? Is the context clear enough? And if not, you may need to consider rewriting or adding an audio description. Write narrative alt tags. So alt tags are the labels written to describe images for assistive technologies. Now, common accessibility advice is to treat them as really succinct labels. This advice is written with the whole of the web in mind, with things like banking websites in mind. But in a storytelling setting, objective labeling of inline imagery just obstructs the flow of the screen reader. It doesn't add anything. It just pauses the screen reader at various points throughout the article, which can get a bit annoying. So try writing your alt tags into the flow of the article at the exact moment you wish to introduce an image. And this will help you to write visual descriptions that genuinely move the story forwards for the blind audience. I'm going to show you an example of the kind of alt tag that The Guardian wrote for the auditorial project, which just has a little bit more narrative context to it.
A plane flies through clear blue skies. Bernie calls the sounds of humans the anthrophony. It is one of the three sources of sound that form his ecosystem soundscapes.
So as you can see, just a little more narrative context helps to move the story forwards and flow from one paragraph into the next, rather than just having the screen reader read image plain. Add an introduction for screen readers. So this is a really important point. Some pre-experienced introductory text for screen reader users can really help to give people a better sense of what to expect from a web page. This is an example of how you experience the auditorial website if you're navigating by a screen reader.
Welcome to Auditorial, an experiment in storytelling that adapts to suit the reader. Co-created by the Royal National Institute of Blind People, The Guardian, and Google. Use headphones for the best experience. Button. Get started.
So it's just a simple exercise in making sure that the first objects that the screen reader hits on your page offer the user some context and an idea of what to expect out of the experience. Include context in hyperlinks. Navigation can be really laborious for people using assistive technologies. So be sure to give people a really clear understanding of what to expect if they commit to clicking a link. Don't label buttons with ambiguous labels like click here. Label them clearly with their function so that the screen reader gives someone a really clear idea of what to expect. Offer alternative colorways. Enabling users to change the color of the experience makes it more comfortable on the eye for those with light or color sensitivities. So black and white, yellow and black, and blue and white are really popular go-to combinations, but even introducing a simple dark mode is a game changer for people who struggle with bright screens. Avoid color confusion. People who experience color blindness will struggle to differentiate between problem colors, for example, red and green or blue and yellow. So ensure you aren't relying on color alone to convey key information, such as completed or incomplete states within your UI. And you can see an example there where we're falling back on clear labeling rather than just color to identify an active or inactive state. Add a speed control. Being able to affect the speed of the storytelling can help to make it more comfortable. So blind users that navigate via screen reader often set their readers to really, really high speeds to improve their efficiency. And this means that natural human speech, while more palatable than synthetic speech, can feel a bit slow by comparison. On the flip side, users who are newly blind and may still be learning to train their attention in a new way via their hearing can find the option to slow down the speed helpful. Offer reduced motion. So this is an interesting one for me because the holy grail of web design for visual designers is often thought to be really whizzy websites with acrobatic transitions, but fast-paced transitions and flashing content can cause issues for users with motion sensitivity, epilepsy, or degenerative eye conditions. So plan a static version of your website alongside the more adventurous experience so that users who require motion reduction also have a quality experience. You do find tools, plugins and features on some devices that can force a reduced motion function. But if you've considered it within your web design, it can just make sure that that particular option is also of a quality, of a creative quality. Select high legibility fonts. So sans serif fonts are generally easier to read for people with low vision. These are fonts like Arial, Helvetica, Calibri, Century Gothic, Tahoma, Badana. All of these are recommended by the RNIB. But even sans serif fonts aren't always perfect. Many have letters with similar forms that get confused by those who can only see part of the word, part of the glyph, and who may have blurred or obstructed vision. So for auditorial, we used high legibility fonts with really distinct letter forms. We used Inter for the platform UI and Guardian Text Sans for the editorial content. So good things to have in your arsenal, and where possible, just avoid block capitals, italics, underlining, or breaking lines with hyphens, as all of these things can interrupt the flow, the reading flow for a user who struggles with their vision. Plan a linear version. So I think this one is really an interesting point, because assistive technologies obviously rely on that linear step-by-step path through an experience, and yet visual designers get really excited about websites with really fresh, unusual design styles, unconventional navigational structures, experiences that enable the user to explore in multiple directions, or choose their own adventure, or linger and explore a digital space at their own pace. And really, this is just a lesson in, if you're planning an adventurous digital experience, that's great, but just make sure you've also planned a clear linear path through it for assistive technologies, so that blind users aren't getting lost or stuck in parts of your experience that aren't clear for screen readers. So that's, I think, a really key premise to take forward. You can design however you like in adventurous and creative ways, as long as you provide a safe, accessible alternative for those who need them. So those are our top tips. I'm going to leave you with some useful tools that will hopefully help you to adopt this mindset and this way of thinking about design going forwards. The first is baked right into the Google Chrome browser. So there is a built-in screen reader. You can find it under Edit Speech, Start Speaking. And this will enable you to check what your website is like for screen reader users. And if you haven't used a screen reader before, I implore you to go away and try that out and see what it's like, because it is a fundamentally different way of experiencing the web, and it will change the way you think about web design as a designer. The second tool is TotalEye. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's an accessibility visualization tool that was built by the Khan Academy with some of Google's Chrome accessibility developer tools. And it's absolutely brilliant. It enables you to add this little panel with the glasses down here in the bottom left to any web window. So you can play around with the toolbar to sense check your designs, and it will flag really clearly for you which parts of the page are failing accessibility guidelines and make really clear suggestions for what you could do about it. So this is a really, really valuable tool. Who Can Use is a fantastic free website that lets you plug in Pantone numbers to check your color combinations and make sure that the color palettes you're using are high contrast enough to be visible to those with all different kinds of color affected vision. And it will actually list out which users your color combinations are likely to be problematic for. And then Stark is a free plugin for XD, Sketch, Figma, and recently Google Chrome, which includes a contrast checker and a color blindness simulation, and it's designed to help designers and developers to build with accessibility in mind. So those are my sort of top tips and tools for designing more inclusive web experiences. If you would like further training, you can check out auditorial.withgoogle.com. There's an array of additional tools, resources, training courses, more in-depth training courses you can take, as well as additional tips and tricks that we picked up whilst building the experience. And do please go and check out the experience for yourself. If I could leave you with one thought, it would be this, that ultimately the web as we know it today is still a very young medium. It has about 40 years or so of history, but it came from very humble beginnings as a way for scientists to share white papers. And it just so happens that in those early iterations, it happens to be designed by predominantly sighted designers. If you were to redesign the internet tomorrow for blind people, it would arguably be something else entirely. And today it's used by over half the planet's population for essential tools and services. So we have a real obligation as designers and makers to make sure that the tools and information available online are equally accessible for all kinds of people with all kinds of needs and preferences. This isn't just the responsibility of the developers who build websites, whether you're a writer, a designer, a filmmaker, an audio storyteller. It's about all makers and creators taking into consideration how their work will be experienced by those with sensory needs different to their own. So I hope that's a mindset that you will take forwards with you. I hope this has been a useful talk for you. Do go and check out the Auditorial website and learn more about designing in a more inclusive way. Thank you so much for joining me today.
We're just getting so many great resources today.
It was interesting how it went on from Anuradha's talk to actually seeing physically how it was being implemented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a nice evolution to the talks tonight.
I'd almost think we planned that.
I did particularly like how she mentioned how Kate mentioned about we do rely on screen readers a lot, and I suppose the voice is quite generic and quite drone. You know, I suppose having websites have their own employees or hiring somebody to do a narrative of a video or a paragraph, it'd be a lot more interesting and easier to digest, I suppose.
Yeah, unfortunately, as Kate said, I think if you were building the internet today, it would be very, very different. But I guess we do have an obligation to start implementing it now.
It does make you think how far behind we must be in terms of it. I mean, we do see so much about diversity, inclusivity, and everything that we do in face-to-face and in work. But when you actually think about the size of the internet, then how much of it is actually implemented there, it does kind of shock you, I suppose.
It is good to know that these resources are out there, though. But like you said, it's implementation.
Yeah, most definitely. It's great to see that there's people actually actively working to bring these tools and resources out there, and they're doing such a fantastic job at it as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess that is us for this evening.
Well, it's been a great night. Thank you guys, and thanks to our speakers.
Yes, big thank you. Anuradha,
Yeah,
Melissa,
definitely.
and Kate, thank you so much.
Definitely.
So if you missed the start of the stream or you want to catch up later, all of our videos will be available on this Dev Party channel. And check out Google developer groups as well if you're interested in getting more involved in the local community.
Yeah. Have a great night.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you.